Okay, it is Monday, August the 31st, the last day of the month. Tomorrow will be September. And welcome to week number 4 already. Week number 4 of drugs and crime. And as I shared with you the first week, that this course was going to go really fast and that you should, uh, not fall behind. I will have your week 2 graded assignments completed. I meant to have them completed yesterday, but I ran into some issues. I'm going to be working on them tonight and tomorrow, so I'll be finishing with them between tonight and tomorrow. Your week 3 assignments that you just completed yesterday. Now, I do want to take a few minutes to remind students of something important that you may not be aware of. Every Monday, which today is a Monday, after assignments are due, if you have not completed your assignment and submitted it, even if you talked to me and told me it was going to be late, I'm still going to be required to put a 0 in there. That 0 does not mean that you can't submit it after that. It just notifies you that you haven't completed the assignment, and it also alerts your advisor because it calculates your GPA. As soon as you submit the assignment, then I can grade it depending on when I grade it, depending on when you submitted it, and depending upon the reasons why it was late as to whether or not you will lose points. And then I can change that grade. Now, by the end of this week, which will be the day before Labor Day, you can still turn in your assignments 1, 2, and 3. After that, unless there's been some special arrangements that we've made and you know who you are if you're out there, then I will accept those assignments. Once we finish with week 4, which will be a week from Sunday, a week from yesterday. To be exact, the exact date is actually September the 6th, I believe it is. Yep, Sunday the 6th, after 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. If you submit any assignments 1 to 3, I will not be accepting them. So I wanted to make sure you're aware of that. But I wanted to make sure you understand the zeros and what they're about, because there are some of you who will see it and you'll think, oh, well, I might as well not submit the assignment. You still have the late assignment policy, 10% up to 7 days. But I told you already that 10% coming off of each day, by the time you get to the 4th or 5th day, you have gotten to D and possibly F, unless there were some extenuating circumstances that we've discussed or that you've reached out to me concerning. So I wanted to make sure that everybody understood that. All right, so now let's get started with this week's work. And let's take a look at, first of all, the schedule here. You have weeks 1, 2, and 3 lectures here. Week 4 will be here either tonight or tomorrow, depending on how fast the WebEx produces it. So today we'll be doing week 4. So then we'll have 2 more lectures. All right. And if you look at the calendar, which we're going to do right now, you will see This is where we are right now. Your initial post is due tomorrow night. On forfeiture, your reply post is due Saturday. Okay. And your written assignments are due Sunday. Your course project is your written assignment along with the quiz. And I've already talked to you about the quiz. It's a time quiz. I did suggest to you that you be sure to try to complete this on a Sunday. Okay. And then your reading assignment, we'll go with that. That's the following week. But you'll see what happens here. After this next week's assignment, Sunday the 13th is the last assignment for Sundays. After that, the course ends on the 18th. So this is week 4 assignments due. This is week 5 assignments due. And then week 6 assignments are due on the last day of class, which is the 18th. I repeat again, after 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, that's it. Okay. Any questions? You can type in the chat box, please. Let me know. Any questions? Okay. All right. So now let's go to the course homepage. And let's look at the announcement. As you should have received already, did you receive the PowerPoints for chapter 6 and 7 of Drugs and Crime? Drugs, Crime? Great. Okay. So that will help you, as I've been saying all along, with your studying for the week and help you to condense what your reading is. A student asked me once, did they have to do the reading with PowerPoints? I says, yes, the reading is always important, but you want to use the PowerPoints as a form of review. And then we're going to deal with combating drug trafficking, and I'm going to talk about that, organizations, DTOs. Oh, you're welcome. And then the law enforcement response to the heroin epidemic. We're going to talk about that a little bit as well. I'm going to provide you with something next week, or rather after the lecture for next week, that we're going to be discussing in week 5, and I will share that with you, some legislation. Then your discussion assignments due tomorrow night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, and reply posts again due Saturday. And then finally, the course project, heroin and opioids, the law enforcement perspective, and the quiz. And then take time to complete the mid-quarter survey if you have a chance to. And then you know what my motto is, because I took time the first week of course to make sure that you understood where I was coming from in terms of that and how I'm here to be of support to you guys, because I've been in some tough challenges myself. So I appreciate the tough challenges that students have even today. So let's look at, again, I want to remind you about the drugs and crime course guide. Use this. Use this because it is beneficial. This week, it will, if you click on it, it'll tell you about module 4. And if you clicked on it, it gives you some explanations to help you again with your assignments. Then it deals with test anxiety. The course project, recommended library databases that you can use for your research as well. Remember, I said always use credible resources. And then inevitably, we also encourage you, if you need help, we have these great tutors in Tutor Match that can help you with these assignments. Now, they won't do the assignments for you, but they will help you to understand the topics, and they will also help you to understand APA if you're having trouble struggling with that as well. All right, if you notice, we talk a whole lot about APA, and we explained during the first week why we focus on that. So that guide is there every week in every one of your assignments. So let's start with the heroin and opioids law enforcement perspective. So in this paper, you're going to deal with what law enforcement is doing to prevent drug traffickers and drug-related activities, and how law enforcement responds to heroin epidemic. And then after your research, you're going to write a minimum of 3 papers. This is standard with all of your written assignments that you have. Remember, I said you got 2, 3, and 4. 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 is the last one that you'll have this written assignment for. So if you, just to show you, just to show you, the final week assignment is just going to be the discussion post and the final exam. And remember, the final exam is going to be, and when we get there, we'll talk about that. But just so you'll know, that's why you should pay attention to your quizzes that you do, because some of those questions are included in the final. And also pay attention to your PowerPoints that can help you. So week 5, next week, you will be doing your final project, Heroin and Addiction, One Person's Journey, and we'll be dealing with this video that I will feature during the session next week. It's pretty long, but you have to watch it anyway, so you might as well watch it. You could kill 2 birds at one stone by listening to the lecture and paying attention to that. That'll be for week 5. So I was just showing you how your written assignment here, that the course project, minimum 3 pages, and you deal with each of these bullet points, and you determine to use 3 credible, reliable sources. I kind of looked at some of your papers, though I haven't graded them yet, and most of you did pretty well with that. But it's very important that you do this and you do this, other than your textbook. Double space APA formatted. You should know that already. Somebody will say, well, I'm looking at it right in here and I don't see it. But remember what I said, that's important. The due date, the rubric. And in the rubric, it tells you the same issues, tells you about 3 credible resources, it tells you about 3-page minimum requirement, and then it tells you down here about APA. So it is part of the requirement, and satisfying APA is making sure that it's very, very, very important. Your paper should be double spaced and not single spaced. Okay. Any questions about the project? Okay. And so you know when it's due. So now let's go back, and the only other assignment that you have is your discussion post dealing with forfeitures, which we've already discussed, and you're going to use this fact pattern here, and then your initial post, and then your reply post, and then your quiz. You know about how those work already. And remember, again, no notes, no books, None of those things. It's a closed book exam. Somebody said, how do you guys know if it's open or closed for us? Because we believe that your integrity is going to kick in and that you're going to do what you need to do, because it'll show out in your performance in the quiz itself. I've had a few people to come back and say to me that they were only able to complete 3 or 4 questions, even in some of these quizzes. And I said, why? And they said, well, I couldn't, and this is what they said. I said, it took time for me to find the answers. They told off on themselves. And that was not good. That's because the fact that we say that you're going to abide by the academic misconduct policy, and you read it, you're not supposed to use any sources at all except this brain. All right. And then, of course, your live lecture key, class, word, phrase I'll give you today. So those are the assignments for this week. So now let's talk about what law enforcement is doing. Let's see, where are they. So we've already discussed the project, discussion, quiz, live lecture. So we're going to discuss these 2 issues, and then we're going to call it a day. Now, drug trafficking organizations are known oftentimes as cartels. They're very organized. They are like many companies that are in the corporate field that are legitimate companies, except they don't have stock and stuff like that. But they operate, they have their files, they have their computer systems that they use, they have their spreadsheets, they have all of this stuff. So they're international in nature, and it talks about the big ones that we deal with are from Mexico and China. And that what they do is they will smuggle their products into the country, and then they'll distribute them, such as the opium and heroin, to the United States manufacturers. And what happens once it hits the states is they cut it. And when I say cut it, that means they add some additional things to it, and like fentanyl and caffeine. Now, fentanyl is, as it said here, it's a manufactured drug, which is synthetic, and prescription drugs, and it's right here in the United States. And the caffeine is a sedative. It's a sedative used for animal, like we call the animal tranquilizers, actually. And think about what I'm saying. A person who uses heroin and uses opium in the United States generally are ingesting themselves with some poisonous things to their body. And there's nobody who controls it, and taking these drugs in frequently cause overdoses, because it's the mixture of the powerful opium and heroin and these other additives that make it very, very dangerous. Take time to read this article. I'm not going to spend time about it dealing with this, but I want you to take the time to read the article, and you'll learn quite a bit about it. Now, as we constantly are dealing with, the argument about the border and this issue about the wall, let me just put to rest right now the issue of the wall. The wall will not, I repeat, it will not deter the drug cartels from Mexico from getting the drugs into the United States. Most of the drugs that come into the United States come in through ports of entry, legal entries but because of the fact that the drugs are hidden in vehicles. Did you know also that people actually will swallow those drugs? They put them in balloons, and the people will swallow the balloons. And then when they get to the United on this side, they will give them a laxative, and you fill in the rest. Uh, you know that right there would should make you stop. Period. Yep, they sure will. They absolutely will. They will. They absolutely will stuff it in all kinds of ways in animals, and they also do it with toys. Uh, yeah, it's tragic. And you know what happens, guys, is that um, the balloons or the stuff that goes in may rupture in the body, and that animal or that individual will OD uh, just like that. But it's very sophisticated, and there's a combination of the sophistication that they utilize and the plain old corrupt um, border officials. Now it talks about here that the proceeds end up in the streets with the gangs if it makes it through, which a lot of it does. There's so much money involved, and people are corrupt. U.S. and Mexican border officials, and unfortunately, they're able to be bought off or owned by the border, the cartels. And so what happens is uh, that the law enforcement agencies then they either ignore the activities or they protect them, one or the other, because they're on their payroll. Um, I can tell you that I'm aware as a lawyer that when I was working as a police officer, an investigator, that I'm aware of there being some corrupt police officers that were in the United States that were on the payroll of some of these individuals, and they would get money. I mean, they weren't paid. See, here's the deal: they weren't paid a lot as law enforcement officials, but they had lavish spending. And so that money came from somewhere, and it actually was because they were owned by the cartels themselves. And these cartels are pretty big, and yeah, very common, very common. You got down in Texas, New Mexico area. Uh, you can go all along down in that area there. And then you have the same issue from Cuba in Florida that happens from the islands, Cuba and Jamaica, and some of the uh, uh, provinces further, that are islands. And so these cartels also are in wars with each other, and so people get killed for turf, operating on the same way as the local gangs operate. One other thing that you should be aware of is that the cartels from Mexico, particularly, operate because they have individuals who smuggle stuff into the country, and that if they don't do their job, they will kidnap or kill the family members of that individual. So they extort them into participating in these kinds of activities. So, uh, as you may have heard of um, what was his name? I can't think of I know his name, but I'm drawing a blank on it for this moment. I always talk about him. He was just most recently arrested for a big Mexican um, cartel leader. Oh, El Chapo. El Chapo. El Chapo was arrested, and he's being tried in federal courts in the United States. And, you know, he was very crafty. He's escaped several times. But what has happened is that his business is still going on because they pass it on to the family member. I think his son is running it now. But the point of the matter is that there's a whole lot of violence that goes along with this. I mean, and it's big, 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 big money. So we rely on the law enforcement people to fight it, but at the highest level, the agency that really deals with it is the DEA, or the Drug Enforcement Agency, and there are agents all over the world. I have a couple of friends who are DEA agents, and we never know where they are, and they're constantly on the move, and they deal with trying to undercut the DTOs that they're assigned to deal with. Now, there is also something else that you should be aware of. Do you think that there are uh, crooked DEA agents out there? Absolutely. See, guys, the bad part about this, and the sad part about it is when I did my studying on drugs and law enforcement when I worked many years, money talks, and there are people who don't care what they do to make money, and that's why here's what I'm gonna tell you. I try to encourage people who go into law enforcement to be aware that you don't get rich being a law enforcement person, but you are there because it's service. And you know, the temptation unfortunately comes upon people when they see a chance to, as they say, supplement their income illegally. And but it goes back to what I say in school, that I want to produce educated, professional, and ethical law enforcement individuals. And what that means is that if you do reach to the level where you're dealing with this kinds of stuff in law enforcement, that you maintain your ethical principles, because it can cause you your death, or it can cause you to end up in jail behind bars. And unfortunately, we find out that there are dirty, or what we call rogue cops, all over the place. And so, in addition to trying to fight these cartels and these agent organizations that are organized crime, then we also have to watch ourselves, because there are some times when people we're working with are not so cool. The other thing that the law enforcement officers depend upon, though, to help is what we call, they call them snitches, but we like to use the term informants. And these are individuals who might catch a case and might be facing long time to cut a deal. And a lot of times what happens with those individuals is that they have to be placed in witness protection, which means their identity is changed, and so forth and so on. Even so far as taking the whole family of the informants and protecting them as well. So as a undercover officer, I've done this, been involved in buy bus, where individuals, we made arrangements for individuals to buy drugs, and we were going to buy the drugs from them rather, and they would bring the drugs, and we'd have the money, and then they would get busted. There are also sophisticated wiretaps. Now, these are used at high levels. We don't deal with that with your average, as we call it, everyday drug dealer. But with the, the leaders or the higher ups in these organizations. So these are some of the tactics that are used, and it requires cooperation. You know, we have to have Mexican authorities cooperating with us, and vice versa, because as I said already, these drug traffickers, they don't recognize any boundaries. They go back and forth. They do their thing. Their business is to make the money by distributing the drugs. So in addition to the DEA who's out there, there's also the ATF, or the Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearms. I have some friends that are members of that as well. And they pretty much focus on the weapon aspects, that because wherever you find drug cartels operating, you're going to find high-powered weapons that are involved. And so the ATF, and then after September the 11th, DHS, or the Department of Homeland Security, joined in to work at the borders to deal with narcotics flowing into the country, especially from Mexico. So anyway, there's always some operation going on, even as we speak, that is being put into place to try to, as they say, cut down on the drug trafficking. And there have been times when some of these agencies have caught Border Patrol agents that were on the take, and not supplementing their income by looking the other way, or either actually participating in moving the drugs themselves. So what happens is eventually it hits the states, and then we start to deal with filtering it down from the state police, and the state police work together with the local police to deal with the dealers at a local level. So you should be aware that the problem is that the higher level of investigative agencies are losing the battle, and it's just not working very well. That's the whole thing about dealing with the war on drugs itself. And you can see this map here kind of gives some of both of these maps right here. All right, so you might just say it's frustrating. It's like trying to catch a mouse with your hands, or a fish with your hands. It's slippery. They just slide away because of all the factors that I previously talked about. So that is why I say that the best approach is to take away the business. And how do you take away the business, Professor Wright? Well, I'm glad you asked. The way you take away the business is getting people well. Because remember, if there is no market for this stuff, it's just like any other business. There's no, it begins to go away or decrease. But as long as, The whole business of, economic supply and demand. If there is a demand for the product, then this is going to continue. And yeah, you're right. Cutting into the demand is the key. And the only way you're going to do that is for us to realize that we cut off the flow, not by the things that I just talked about earlier, which obviously aren't working well, but by getting people cured and help. So law enforcement is learning something, and we're going to talk about this right now. What law enforcement has begun to recognize quite clearly is that because of the fact that heroin specifically has been brought out into some of the areas, not just the urban areas, but the suburban areas. And there's a lot of individuals finding themselves overdosing uh, from these the heroin or opioid with the additives of fentanyl, which is a prescription pill, and opioid pain medication. And so lift and also laced with the caffeine that I talked about, which is the animal tranquilizer. And heroin addicts will take this stuff, um, inject the lace heroin without any concern for whether it's pure or not. And if it's pure, by the way, it would kill them too. But the point of the matter is that this is their way of uh, taking an amount of heroin and increasing the profits that they're going to make by cutting it. And so individuals take this in and they find themselves, um, and I had to deal with this. But we didn't have what I'm going to talk about next in a minute to help us. And we would come across individuals and they would just OD. They die. There's not, we would get to them too late. But now law enforcement has become uh, clear and recognizing the fact that because these drugs are getting through and there is an epidemic of heroin, that we need to do something. And so law enforcement officers are trained just like EMTs, emergency medical technicians and paramedics, to administer Narcan, which is a brand of Noxolone. And this is a prescription drug that is an antidote. And what it does is it arrests the damage that the opioid can do, such as slow breathing, and or stopping your breathing. And what Noxolone does is it blocks the effects and reverses it. So in other words, it brings you back to life. And it works on overdoses of heroin and prescription painkillers, such as oxycodone, hydrocodone, and morphine. And it's a controlled substance, and it's a very expensive thing. And that uh, it's used by departments, and they're licensed. These individuals are licensed to get this stuff and use it. And so what happened is that the Food and Drug Administration. Let me see. Get your comment there. Yep. Yep. Yes, Minneapolis is an area. We have that here in our Chicago area. And so what has happened is that the FDA approved uh, so that this Narcan can work a Noxolone by nasal, so which is good, and it doesn't require you to inject it. So nasal application, he says, easier for first responders to administer and with minimal training. And so you can read more about that in this article here. But I can tell you, I have a student who I tried to reach. I reached out to him, but his schedule wasn't clear enough to try to come in this week to be with me and talk about it. And he works for the Cook County Sheriff's Police Department, and that's what he does. And he was sharing some information about some of the things that he has seen. But I can tell you that it is very, 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 very serious, and that these kids are helping to save lives. However, there are problems. There's a book that I have. Give me a second. Let me pull it up here for you. It's it's called From Dope to Hope: A Man in Recovery. His name is Tim Ryan. Um, I recommend getting the book. It's an easy read. I tried to get the school to get it. I don't know if they got it in the library or not, but it's called From Dope to Hope by Tim Ryan. Um, just for your information. And he came to Rasmussen campus. Hit the ISBN number. This book was written in 2017. Is 978-9845917-2-5. In this book, he tells a story about himself, how he was addicted to drugs, and that he is now a counselor. And he wrote this book, and From Dope to Hope, because he was so hooked on it. Probably one of the most frustrating things he said that he encountered was losing his son, that he wasn't able to help, but he continues to help all the time people. And so it's a real serious thing. And so now what I want to do before we adjourn is there's a short video. It's called Chasing the Dragon: The Law Enforcement Perspective. I'm going to let you watch this. I'm going to tell you that I'm going to take, may not be the best, but I want you to listen to it, and if not, then go back and pay attention to it. I'm going to see if I can get the closed caption going on there.
Prescription pills and opiates has definitely become an increasing problem that we've seen, and not only involving the crime to investigate actual drug diversion, but it, involves other things too. People start committing other crimes when they start seeing, the need that they have. I think the first part of it is that start kids with pregnant age, kids that are, middle school, start to say, try out these pills. They might get started first, and then talk to them later. So, just the drive, seven, just to get to bed, so you need a job. You can't get a job.
So, so you see my point. My point is that it's at, like I said, it's at an epidemic level.
Is is reaching out now, trying to help people to save lives, but unfortunately, sometimes it's too late. And what we're going to discover next week when we deal with chasing the dragon, a longer version of it that the FBI put out, you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about from that. But I'm going to again encourage you to, as you prepare your assignments this week, look for details, not only about how the agencies themselves are operating to try to deal with the war aspects of it, but look at the rescue aspects of it as well. And so law enforcement now, as I said before, are being pressed like never before into becoming EMTs, or first responders, in the sense not just to um, arrest people for committing crimes, but to actually help people. I'm going to introduce you to some legislation that took place in Illinois called Senate Bill 3023. I will be sending you an email tonight, and we're going to use this for next week's lecture. But it's heavily, um, um, it explains law enforcement attempt. And a gentleman I met by the name of Eric Gunther, who's a Munda Lion, which is a local police department here in Illinois, um, led this fight along with the uh, organization known as the, what is it? Is it the Illinois? Well, it's called the SB 3023, the Community Law Enforcement Partnership for Deflection and Substance Use Disorder Treatment Act. We're going to talk more about that next week. Again, I will have that information for you. But think about it in terms of when you're doing your research um, this week. So you need to be aware that we are in um, a, a battle dealing with drug trafficking, dealing with saving the lives of individuals once it's crossed the border and come into the country itself, where we try to find ourselves saving the lives of individuals. And so it's a chase. It's a chase. And so tonight, I want to give you a phrase that's chasing the dragon. And that's what I want you to know about. Give me the whole thing, chasing the dragon, in order to get your points. Submit that. But and when you think about this, and you look at it with that little short video that you saw this week and the long one you're going to see next week, you'll have a realistic picture or an idea of what law enforcement deals with on a daily basis, and the direction that You know, we are heading in as those of us who are heading in law enforcement. We're moving away from the lock them up and throw away the key. Um, and we need to get them help. And the message has reached law enforcement, and you'll see that coming up in the next week. So I want to say good night. Any questions about anything tonight? Okay. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to say good night. I'll see you next week. Be sure that you come next week, because it's a very emotional lecture. It's a short one for me because I want to make sure that you see this video uh, during the session. So have a good week. And again, I'll get your week 2 graded within the next day or so between tonight and tomorrow. So good night.